Hello, everyone, and welcome. This is Haunted Hearsay. I'm Caroline, and I'm up in Donegal, and I'm joined by Ben, who's down in Dublin. Hi, Ben. How are you?
Hello, Caroline. How are you? I'm great. No complaints, really. Just plodding
Same old,
along.
same old, same old.
Yeah, we're gonna have that for a while, I think.
How did you get through Easter? Did you do anything for it, or?
Just saw my parents and my siblings, very family orientated, but it was nice. Um, and
The
I got
weather
a.
was terrible.
Oh, we had nice weather, I think. I'm trying to remember. We had a barbecue one day as well, but maybe not
Mm.
on Easter. I can't remember actually. But yeah, no, we had a roast at Easter, so yeah, it was nice. It was very quiet. I was very busy in work anyway, so I get a bit anxious when I have like to, to do 5 days work in 4 days or whatever, you know. So
And you have no festivals again this year in Cannes or anywhere like that?
no, this actually tomorrow I would have been in France, um, starting
So
my.
there's no, so cancelled this year as well?
Yeah, it's all online, which is not very exciting. Yeah,
No.
this is the TV market is April. So April 12th, which next week it starts, I think. So yeah, it's a shame, but also I couldn't like there was a point where people were trying to get me to travel during at the beginning of the pandemic where everyone was like, ah, I'll be fine, and it wasn't going to be fine. So I'm glad anyway that I'm here, and hopefully next year I'll be back. Oh, you're back now for me.
Am I?
Yeah, but
Do you
I'm
think is there gremlins in the work because of what we're going to do tonight?
maybe, maybe. Will we just get stuck into it and hope for the best? And
Isn't that possible?
well, and everything's a possibility, really, isn't it? Digital
Yes,
demons.
and see what you can salvage at the end of it.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
might be just an audio piece
Yes.
by the end of it.
Hi everyone. If you're getting interruptions from us, yeah, anyone watching, if you're getting interrupted, it's we think it might be the weather that's affecting the internet. We don't know, so we're going to dive straight into the and, and it's a scary subject for a lot of people. But we're not going to go in whether we believe it or not believe it. It's just a conversation on how would you tell the difference? And it's about possession and exorcisms. And really, and we know in films, when you see it in films and things like that, you've got somebody tied to a bed and they're frothing at the mouth and they're doing all this. But what is it that, I mean, possessions are something that even the Catholic Church will acknowledge and happen all over the world. How do you know? What is it they do first? I mean, they obviously don't start off the ranting and raving, you know. Um, I'm just saying it because I have a very, I can't say very much about this story, but it's something that happened in Donegal and it happened in the last 20 years. And it was very unfortunate, but it was where a person believed that their mother was possessed by the devil and tied her to a bed and set the house on fire. Now, people came in and tried to put the fire out, neighbors, and tried to save the mother, but she couldn't be saved. And this person went to an insane asylum, was committed to an insane asylum, and died a year later, still saying that she believed her mother had been possessed by the devil. Now,
That,
I mean, it's yeah. I mean, how do you know it? At what point do you say somebody's crazy? Or what point do you say somebody's, mentally unstable? Crazy is not a word I should have used there, but I mean, whether it's through trauma or through sickness or through hereditary reasons,
mhm.
or is that something that that woman absolutely believed and maybe had a bit of a, I don't know, schizophrenic episode about it or something?
Yeah, like I was
I mean,
watching.
it's not, we don't hear about it as much here. In America, you hear about it quite a lot. And Yeah, I was just going to say in the subcontinent you hear about it as well, and that leads me to, you were watching something about in India, was it, or Pakistan?
Pakistan, and it's the border of Pakistan and Afghanistan. So it's where the people. It's like one of the biggest. It's the biggest community of non-Muslims in Pakistan, and basically they are into the
Yeah.
supernatural, and also things like fairies, which I thought was very interesting, because you don't really see fairy stories outside of kind of Nordic or Western Europe, Scandinavia, and that kind of thing. So I thought it was quite interesting that in Pakistan they have a fairy tradition. But the thing I was watching, there was a possession in it where an old man was deemed to be possessed by the village, and he was sick in the sense that he had an illness that a doctor would have tried to treat him for, weakness and those kind of things, maybe delusions, and the medicine couldn't help him. So then they got the shaman in to do exorcism. But interestingly, the way they do it was the shaman inhaled a load of juniper leaves. If you know juniper, it's what gin is made from, juniper berries.
They make gin.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
what they did was they light it on fire and he breathes it all in, and he went into a trance. This is the shaman now, and the man beside him, the possessed man, was just lying on the ground. He just seemed weak. He didn't seem. He wasn't speaking in tongues or anything like that, or he wasn't like. It's not what we.
Yeah.
But basically, shaman goes into this big trance and runs out of the room and starts digging a hole outside the front of the house. And once he keeps digging, and it's quite deep. And what he finds in the hole is like a skull that's wrapped. It basically, somebody had done black magic on this family, on this man, to possess him. And the shaman was identifying where the possession was coming from. Now, the interesting thing for me as a kind of semi-skeptic was that there's no way he'd know, unless it was the shaman that put the thing in the hole. There's no way. When he was digging with a pickaxe in like solid ground, it wasn't like.
There's always the possibility.
Mm-hmm.
But I wanted to hark back to something you said about then near the border of Afghanistan is where the original iron net pattern came from.
Yeah. And
The
another kind of
one that's synonymous with the Irish people now. And the Bowron also came from there.
Oh, interesting.
So you have to wonder, did our belief in fairies come from there?
The people there are very light-skinned and blonde hair, and they have green eyes. So you're talking about Pakistan here. So generally people in Pakistan would be sort of dark-skinned and dark hair and brown eyes. So they think there's a link to Alexander the Great when he conquered that area, and his soldiers stayed behind apparently and bred with the people. So, but I'm not sure if you heard the end of the possession story that I was mentioning.
No, sorry, please finish that.
No, it was just the guy.
Apart from he went out and dug up the skull.
He went out and dug up the skull, found this black magic thing, and apparently the man got better after. And they got rid of this skull. But where the skull was buried was fascinating. It was about a meter underground at the front of the house, at the front door, like literally on the front step. You wouldn't notice, I think, unless it was put there years before. The people living in the house would notice that.
Well, that's definitely attached to black magic and curses and witchcraft.
The skull was wrapped up.
It wasn't. There's also I seen it like you. I've ever watched the Ghost Adventures, the one that's on television. Well, there's also haunted paranormal lockdown, etc. But the one thing that they all have in common about any house where anyone's had a lot of bad luck, usually upon sort of investigation, they've either found something in the wall, be it like a shoe wrapped with a bit of cloth, or and these were done to curse people.
Yeah.
An object for whatever reason, and I don't know the whole ins and outs of how that works, but yeah, does seem to be a common denominator among different not religions, but what would you call them, factions, groups.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it's sort of like, witchcraft, if you read the darker side of witchcraft and sort of the dark arts, etc.
I'm just going to let my cat
So
in.
I mean, it's very possible because we do share an awful lot of our uh well, I mean, like the Arnett, the Byron. I mean, that's quite significant. The fact that the Sumerians knew about Loch probably before most people up in this part of the country knew about it. So there's definitely a connection, a Celtic connection.
Yeah.
From those areas. But back to the possession thing, theirs is, I mean, we can sort of like maybe dismiss it as being, oh well, it's this, that, but theirs is an ancient old way of believing. And it's the same one they've had for the last, who are we really in the 21st century, because we are not au fait with it here to say, that it's a load of nonsense. Not when, so many people believe in it. And then, as I say, that thing that happened here, we've got real gremlins. And I was told I really had to summarize that story because it's a touchy subject.
Yes.
And it's still relatively new and relatively raw. But there wasn't a lot I could go into about it. But it's so weird. I was told probably best not to say anything. And this is the first time this has happened to us, where we are having so much interference.
Yeah, we've been doing this now since last year. So
yeah, we're doing this. It's Halloween, and this is the first time this has happened.
Well, maybe we should move on.
Well, should we move on to the cemetery you went to over Easter? How about we move on to that?
And maybe our internet will get better. The demons will go away. Yeah, so
it appears to be better already.
Be gone, demons. So I was I decided, well, I was going to go to Glasnevin Cemetery, which would be the most famous cemetery in Dublin, the old kind where all the celebrities are buried, or Irish patriots and that kind of thing. But it was outside of my 5 kilometers, which in Ireland we're locked down to 5 kilometers. So I felt a bit guilty. Also, it was an hour and a half walk. I wasn't really in the mood for it. So I went to another cemetery. It was closer, and it was a beautiful day. And I'm going to put up the pictures. It's called Mount Jerome Cemetery, and actually, I have a connection to the place because anyone I know who's been cremated, that's where they get cremated. This place called Harold's Cross.
Whereabouts in Dublin is it though?
Dublin 6. It's beside kind of if you go past Rathmines, further up out of the city, kind of up that direction.
Yes, I know you are.
It's still Dublin 6.
So it's nowhere near any of the ancient burial grounds.
No. Well, I don't know really what was there before, but it's a very big graveyard, and then it has just the chapel. Allegedly, my grandfather, his ashes are going to go in a thing there soon. So I thought that I'd check it out instead. But also, side note, this is something that I think is disgusting. Everyone is going to think it's disgusting. Something was stolen from my granny's grave, and we just found out yesterday or at the weekend. Like ornamental things were stolen out of a graveyard. Yeah, off of her grave. My mum was very upset. It's my dad's mother,
Oh
but
my God.
like it was something that my mother had left on my grandmother's grave,
Oh,
and it was stolen.
that's very.
Yeah, it's sad. Mum was upset about it, and I'm sure dad was upset about it.
The only thing your mother, the only your mother have is that that person will have no luck with it. It'll, and with any luck, your grandmother will put the fear of God into them.
Yeah. Well, like the nerve of someone,
I mean, you don't
you just don't do that. Like, do you
like
want?
that's the lowest of the low, desecrating a grave.
Yeah,
No, you don't. That's, you just don't. That's like, as I say, it's the lowest of the low. There's nothing but scum that would sort of like sink to that level to desecrate someone's resting place.
exactly. So I didn't, and on
As I
that,
say, I hope your grandmother scares the bejesus right out of them.
so do I. She was a force to be reckoned with, I believe, when she was younger. So hopefully she does.
Was
But back to the other Mount Rome graveyard, there were a few
fingers
unmarked.
crossed, Granny.
There were a few unmarked graves that I had a nice time. I walked around and I didn't clean any graves, but I there were a few unmarked ones that I had some quartz crystal with me and I left some things on their grave that were nice and like
No, that's a nice
I
thing
was
to do. Was there any famine graves there?
no, I think well actually this is the thing. I only went back afterwards and checked out who was actually buried in the graveyard. The only notable people in this graveyard are Oscar Wilde's father and Arthur Guinness. So they're reasonably notable. Well, I mean, Oscar Wilde's father is probably not
All
that
right,
notable.
okay.
There's also It's a lot of politicians and there's a guy called Thomas Davis. Thomas Davis was an Irish patriot from I think he died in 1840s or maybe he died in 1860s. I can double check. He was the leader of the National Republican youth group at the time. So he led a bunch of young Irish patriots to fight the British, I suppose.
Right, okay. I suppose there must have been like a younger group of the United Irishmen who would have been about at the time.
I think so. I think it was probably a group to get everyone ready for more hardcore republicanism. But yeah, so he's there. I'm going to go back actually, and I'm going to find Arthur Guinness's grave. Maybe I'll have a Guinness beside Arthur Guinness's grave. It's all old graves. It's not. Although I did see some young people. So the last thing I wanted to say, I mentioned this before. It's about a saint who could fly.
Yes, that's right. St.
And
Joseph.
Saint Joseph of Cupertino. So there's a few. I think there's a few Saint Josephs to be honest. But this Saint
Oh,
Joseph,
actually, and where's Cooper?
Italy. It's a part of Italy, and he was born
All
in.
right, okay.
I have it written down here. Give me a sec. 17th century, and his father died before he was born, and it left the family kind of in financial ruin. And as a result, his mother gave birth to him in a stable, which is sort of similar to how Jesus was born. Uh, he also had
Symbolic.
symbolic, yeah. He also had some sort of special needs. He used to sort of have visions, and some people would say that he had a mental disability or a learning disability. And he tried to join the Franciscan friars, but he was rejected. And then he tried to join a group of Capuchin friars, and he was eventually accepted. And he then became a priest, I believe. But the interesting thing about him was he was able to do these supernatural miracles, in particular flying. So he would apparently fall into religious ecstasy and start levitating during mass, and it's even said that it was witnessed by the Pope at the time, and it was dramatized in a film called The Reluctant Saint from 1962. So if anyone wants to check that out.
Oh,
But
must be out for that.
yeah, I just thought it was
Yeah.
fascinating because I first heard about it on another podcast, and then I heard about it in something else, and I was like, I better speak about this because this is fascinating. And so he basically demonstrated that he could fly in front of people. Levitation, let's not say flying sounds a bit like Superman, but he could demonstrate that he levitated, and he'd go into trances and it would just happen
Levitate to a great height.
to a great height. Now you're
Yeah,
talking.
he could levitate.
Yes, and generally,
Yeah.
like there was one anecdote where he did it. He arrived in a church, and there was a statue of Mary that was very similar to. I think he was stationed somewhere that wasn't where he was from, and when he went into this church, they had a kind of replica of the statue of the Virgin Mary that he knew from his hometown, and apparently he, in front of an audience of people, including other priests and the congregation, he flew up and burst into tears and gave the statue a hug. Or that's the story anyway. So I just thought it was really interesting because you don't really hear such.
Now, well, you were telling me this before Easter, and I was really fascinated by it. And I was talking about what do you call it? That dynamo magician
Dynamo,
who could levitate to a great height. But that's obviously something he's worked on, and he it's something he's worked on. And I was wondering, this Saint Joseph, it's very possible that that was a talent that he had, but he tuned into it naturally because of maybe his learning disabilities. And so for him, it was just a God-given natural gift and something that he could tune into without any effort. Whereas you do have magicians that can do this, but they'll say there's a trick to doing it, or there's a, but they've practiced it and they've worked on it. It's possible that this St. Joseph had this as an actual God-given talent. So it's not unbelievable, because we've seen people in the 21st century levitate in front of crowds, and there's people standing around them, and there's no way, how and under goodness do they do this? Maybe this boy's soul was just pure, and that was something he could tap into without too much effort.
Yeah, like it didn't seem like it was a calculated thing that he was trying to trick people by the stories. It seemed to
No, and for
happen.
the church, and for the church to agree in those days, then they had to have an awful lot of evidence, because the church spent more time trying to debunk things like Fatima and Lourdes and
I
all
forgot
these.
to mention he was pulled up in front of the Inquisition twice and demonstrated it, and he was
There had to be a lot of written evidence.
and at the time there was a lot of witch trials and all the rest, and he demonstrated this, and he was allowed to not be punished.
Yeah, to survive. They couldn't find him guilty of being anything other than having a God-given talent.
Yeah, because he was a religious like a priest, and had powers. So another thing about him is that in his test to become a priest, he was mentally or he had mental disability, and apparently the answers just came to him from God.
Yes, yeah, I absolutely believe that. And to put it into context for people that are skeptics, you can't say, oh, that's not possible. You think, well, actually, you've seen magicians do it in front of you on television or in arenas or whatever, and it's an act, something that they've tapped into, but they're still doing it. We just don't know how to tap into it. But this person obviously could without even thinking. So it had to be, that's why pure, with no ulterior intent, not trying to make money, but for him to do that in those days of the height of the Inquisition was, that's pretty special. And not to have been burned at the stake as a witch or a heretic or whatever.
As a result of being dragged in front of the Inquisition, there's definitely paperwork, as you said, and the Vatican Library allegedly have huge amounts of eyewitness accounts. Like, it wasn't just once or twice it happened. It happened throughout his whole life. 60, I think he's 60 years. Over the space of 60 years.
There'll be lots of things. There'll be lots of things, the likes of not just the Vatican, but various governments will have hidden from people that have happened, that they've maybe decided, we don't want people to know that someone can do this or did this, or, there'll be lots of events and things like that that have happened that we're not hearing about, that are tucked away in the catacombs of the Vatican or tucked away in Windsor. They seem to have it. They've got records dating back to Norman times of things that happened in England, etc. I don't know in America what the equivalent would be of who's hiding what, but
the CIA or something.
There's lots of it. And it would never surprise me for someone to turn around and go, well, this has been happening for a couple of thousand years, and we do have these scrolls that talk about it.
There's also
that wouldn't surprise me. It really wouldn't.
A culture of levitation in sort of India and Hindu sort of. I guess the original idea of levitation that I'd have in my mind.
Well, I can do and I am no magician. But it's like that. It's like that trick that we can do, and it's but it's a mental trick. That's the whole thing. It's a mental trick. It's like a wee exercise, and everybody tunes into a part of their brain that we're just not using consciously, and that's that one, stiff as a board, or
light as a feather,
flat as a
board. Yeah,
whatever it is.
Yeah,
light as a feather, stiff as a board. That's it. I couldn't remember off the top of my head, but sure, I can do that. You could probably do that as well. And with a bit of practice, most people can do that. And you can actually make the person weightless. You lift them up on 2 fingers above your head. Now, there's obviously science to that, but the science doesn't have an answer for that. They don't know why that happens yet.
Well,
there's something to it. So, to say that we can't do that.
Did you know that they found a fifth force of fifth force? So, do you know gravity is a force of nature and physics? There's other forces that are kind of to do with how protons and electrons bind with each other and that kind of thing. So there's 4 forces that in physics, and apparently they found a new one yesterday, or they released info. BBC. It's going to change physics forever. A fifth force.
And is this in CERN?
Not in CERN, actually, in America, but it was through the same the Hadron Collider, the particle accelerator. They just have a smaller version of it over in America, so it's in the American small version. But actually, in CERN, they're testing it now, the theory. So I thought that was fascinating.
In our awareness of how physics work, I think we're still very new to it, and that we're still learning every day. Sure, it's only like in this last century. I thought dark matter was like the God particle. But we're learning, we're evolving, we're picking them up. That maybe the physical world as we know it isn't the only one there is in existence. We could be in parallel, living parallel lives with other energies, as it were.
And once you get into that sort of quantum physics stuff, and it defies all sort of known physics from before.
I think it's amazing, because there's just no, the possibilities are endless. If you can think it, then it's a possibility.
It's exciting.
That's, if you can think it, it's a possibility, and it's like when you used to see these things on films years ago that looked so futuristic back in, say, the 70s and things like that, of how it would look in the 20th, 21st. They're not on, like, obviously the bubble cars aren't as popular as we thought they would be flying about the place.
Flying cars.
But there are lots of similarities.
Well, I'll tell you something. When I was a kid, I used to fantasize about using a video phone, and here we are. Like,
I know, I can
concept of video phone.
Still remember.
Oh my God.
So listen, well, we're having a few clear moments here, so we'll wrap it up in the few clear moments and see if you can salvage anything out of the gremlins that have been working through our broadcast tonight. I would love to have been able to say more about that incident. I can't, and hopefully then we've got guests coming in the next few weeks as well. The restrictions lift from Monday, so we can travel around the county from Monday about and getting more pictures and videos of places that I've been talking about going to for a long time. And I want to go up and get some more information on the fairy circles and stones that there are along Door. Those are ones that are relatively new to me, and I'll get pictures of the ones up in Mulladuff. But now that we'll be able to get out and about, and fingers crossed the weather will get better. Have you noticed, since we've stopped talking about the other thing completely, the gremlins seem to have gone? Well, I'm not going to jinx it and start talking about it again, but we will go into that conversation. We will go into that subject again, because it seems to be happening more and more around the world. And is it just that it's really happening more, or is it because there's double the population maybe, or is there just more evil in the world?
Yeah, that was the question that we've been pondering for a while now.
It does. It seems to be these things that were isolated cases and made for fabulous stories or fantastic stories now seem to be not as isolated, and a lot more common. And the fact then that the church are openly acknowledging it,
and
that scares the pants right off of me. That's sort of, that we are living in treacherous times.
Generally as well.
And on that happy note, we'll say good night.
And we'll see everyone next week.
We'll be back next week with some more happy thoughts.
Alrighty.
Yes, with lots more happy thoughts. So, Ihawaii from Donegal, and Ben.
Good luck.
Good night, I'd say, from Dublin.
Yeah, slán leat, slán libh.